Peace everyone, Unmask here, and welcome back to another live critique session. Today I have a number of your artworks here to go through, so I'm going to just jump right in. Hello Claire, good to see you. Hope everyone is having a fantastic week. Up first here is Linda. I think I have two Lindas today, but this is one of the art club projects that we recently completed. And yeah, so Linda submitted a couple art club projects. And this one came out really good. You did. I like the, so for those of you that don't know this, this chess piece, Linda changed the color. She kind of made it like a chess piece made of jade and matched the eyes, which I thought was a really cool thing to do. And you did really good on the skin colors. The skin colors look good. The eyes look really great. The eyelashes look really, really good, especially on this, the eye on the right. The left eye, I feel like it could have been a bit darker. Maybe it's just the like the light reflection off of the paper with the camera. The other thing with the dress, like you can kind of see those outlines of those darker black shapes. And from the reference photo, you don't really see those clear distinctions of color. So I would have liked to see a darker blue here so you don't see those clear distinctions. But still really good. The hand came out good. A little heavy on the outlining of the fingers a little bit. What you'd want to see, what you'd want to kind of do here is take that darker color. Let me just zoom in here and get nitpicky. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to feather that out just a little bit so that you don't have those really distinct outlines, because that's what's tricky when you do hands is you have those separations of the fingers and you don't want to have lines, but sometimes it feels like you have lines. And so what you want to do is you want to blend those into the skin. And really the only edge that you have is, so the edge here, if you look at this edge here, what it is it's the color of the finger behind it in contrast with the top edge of this finger. So that's sort of where those lines come from. But here it's just a little bit too much of like a clear line. And that line, that color right there, should be blended into the finger behind it, so that that line doesn't just feel like an outline. And same thing with the jaw. That's another difficult area that you'll come across. But also the skin here, I remember the skin here being a bit darker. I know going dark on the skin is very scary, but you did a good job. The other thing with the hair is something that is a lot darker. And I remember when we were going through this, I was talking about how going darker on the main body of the hair is what's going to give you those bright, shiny highlights. So you can see that by going darker with the hair in that area. So here's the before, here's the after. If you go darker, you can see how much shinier her hair becomes. And so that's what you want to try to improve on in the future. These other darker areas of the hair could be filled in a little bit more and be darker. But otherwise, you did a really good job. Portraits are hard, so don't be too hard on yourself, but it came out really good. All right, Linda's next piece is this nice little rusty study that we did. And honestly, Linda, you captured the texture like really, really well. You got the colors good. This part here, I really thought you did like fantastic on getting those little dark, like maroon pitted areas of the rust came out really good. the rust on the lock itself, and also the logo. The logo is just really, really well done. Like you got it just subtle enough to show up, but not look like a line drawing, you know. So it looks etched into the lock really well. I think really the only two things that I would sort of nitpick on this project here with the cylindrical shape of this lock. So one of the things that got to work on a little bit is creating that three-dimensional cylindrical shape of this part of the lock. And that's just by simply isolating that bright part right down the center of it and having it just a bit smoother. You can kind of see how it looks more cylindrical now. That's going to give it that three-dimensional look a bit better. The other thing is this. You mentioned that you freehanded this. This screw here is just too big, and for the size of the screw, the cross in the middle is too small, because these screws are supposed to be the same size. So this and this, they weren't drastically different in size, and so this one just needs to be teeny tiny bit smaller, and it just stands out a little bit. But other than that, it's fine. But yeah, you did a really good job capturing the textures and the colors and all of that. So good job. Let me take a quick second to say hello to everyone that came in. Hello, Susan, Marcy, Linda, Chrissy, Sudarshana. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that remotely correctly. Don, Joanne, Ella, Dadek, Chandri, Sneaks, Cherry. Good to see all of you guys. But yeah, fantastic job, Linda. I look forward to seeing more of your work in the future. Alrighty, up next is Jennifer, because Jennifer likes to submit just the most fantastic work and make my job so much harder to figure out how I'm going to critique her work. She did this, she really likes to use pastels and colored pencils in combination with one another, something that I don't personally do, but she just does it so well, right? Like, we can all agree that every time we come across her work, it's just so well done. And she's so good at the depth of field, where she has like this very blurry background, and then as it comes closer to the main subject, it starts to get more and more in focus. I think a really good example is just looking at how blurry this part is, and then you can start to see some of the flowers that are not as blurry. And then even down here, this petal here is just even just a tiny bit blurry before it gets to the real in focus stuff, like the flowers right here in the middle and this leaf. And I was looking at this when I was like she's gonna make me nitpick, because there's really nothing that I can say to improve on. But what I think that you can do is you can branch out the colors beyond what maybe the reference is showing, because I don't have the reference, so I can't get down to the nitty gritty of the exact things that might be off a little bit. But what I would like to see is a bit more color variation, because you have this nice yellow here, this like yellowish green, and I think that adding some tinting, some touches of that yellowish green to the flowers here helps make those flowers exist in that space a bit more. You have like this pure white, or what appears to be pure white on the flowers, and having some of that yellow brought into the flowers is just going to give it a bit more warmth, because these purples and blues are really, really cold colors in comparison to this bright yellow back here. And then another thing that you could do is You could play around with maybe some more reddish purple, like magenta-y, like very like super bright. Like this is like a much warmer purple or just a warm red, right? And if you take some of this color and you tint some of these transition areas where you go from the darker colors into the purple, like for instance, right here around the center of the flower, it kind of looks like just like purple with black added to it. It sort of loses its bright saturation. And if you use some of the bright pink or red to tint those transition areas, you're going to bring back some nice rich saturation and also some warmth back into the flowers. And by doing this, your flowers are just going to look more vibrant without being overly vibrant. You know what I mean? You don't want to use like neon colors all the time, but you can splash in some of this this color in those transitionary parts of the flower, and it just livens them up a bit more. So that's pretty much the only things that I can come up with for a critique of this one. Obviously, the accuracy is perfect. The values are perfect. Texture, everything is just fantastic. I just think that you could have went a little bit warmer in the highlights and also the transitionary colors. So that's something to consider in the future. But fantastic job as always. Oh, hey, what's up, Mache? Good to see you. And Georgina, Ozzy, good to see you as well. Try to say hello to everyone that I see in chat. Up next is Garima, and this is a lovely graphite portrait. It looks very accurately drawn, and the eyes look good. They're very piercing, right at the camera. The anatomy looks good. I think some work in the hair is probably where you feel like you might be struggling a little bit. You got a lot of the like loose flyaways that look really good, especially like this twirl that comes down beside her face. Really good. It looks very natural. The softness of the shading is also very good. You have this cheekbone that's nice and soft. You have this nice angle that cuts across, but it's not too hard, so it doesn't make her face look blocky and kind of weird. However, you didn't quite get that on the bridge of the nose here. So if you soften this edge right in here, probably make her nose look a little bit more rounded and not so hard right there. Another thing, like you have the highlight on the nose, and it's hard to tell exactly what's going on with the nostril flare. Now I don't have the reference for this, so I'm sort of just doing a loose correction based on what I think sort of looks a bit strange. So the nostril flare will have the shadow more on the side and then a little bit of a highlight on the top. And then the tip of her nose is usually like underneath here. That will be the darker area, sort of under this part. And that little ball that everybody sort of has at the front of their nose, that little tip there. And then for the highlight, it's tough to make the corrections without the reference photo, but something like that. The light source is a little hard to discern. It does appear to be coming down from this direction like this. So what you'd want to see a bit more of a highlight coming here, a little bit on the cheekbone right there. Again, the nose, you're going to have that direction from there. And then the bridge of the nose having that highlight, probably not that strong. But the highlight sort of on that side. just fade that. The upper lip here might have a little bit of a highlight. The lip itself, usually lips are a bit shinier, so you can have a little bit brighter highlight on the bottom lip. And then also her shoulder. So you'd see like a more of a highlight sort of in this area where the light is coming from. Remember, the light is coming from this direction. So this part is pointing back towards that light. And then just fade that so it's not so bright. A little bit of a highlight running across her shoulder there. So those highlights, you usually can't add white on top of white paper. I can't tell if this paper is supposed to be gray or if it's white paper. But in order to get those highlights, you have to darken the skin overall. And that's where people usually fall or get into trouble with the graphite portraits, is that they never darken the skin enough in order to bring out those highlights. And what you'd want to do is just kind of gray out the skin and then use an eraser to bring out those bright spots. But you can see that if you were able to get the skin darker and then use an eraser to brighten up those spots, you'd get a much more three-dimensional look to the portrait. Now with the hair, you focused a little bit too heavy on the individual strands of hair. And if you were to just take a color and cover up some of those strands so that they're not so spaghetti-like, and instead just flat, solid colors. So I'm just kind of painting over to cover up the strands to get less of them showing. And then what you do is you take your color after the fact. I can't do hair with a mouse, so you have to forgive me. And then you add the hairs. So you want to focus on the shapes, the large shapes that establish the values, and then add the single strands of hair over top of that. And that's just going to get you softer, more natural looking hair. As you can see, like right now, the hair is like every single strand of hair is being drawn out, and you don't want to do that. You want to do the big shapes and then have the hairs over top. Oh, hey there, Lisa. Alrighty, up next is Lisa Clark. She did this colored pencil falcon, it looks like. It looks like a falcon, right? Not mistaken there. Or a hawk. One of those two. Hard to tell those two apart. And you know, when I looked at this, I had to go back because I thought it was watercolor. Like when I looked at this, I was like, that's watercolor, right? And then I looked at the post and she said that it's Prismacolor. And I'm like, I'm still looking at it, and I have a hard time believing that she didn't typo and mean to say, yeah, it's watercolor, not Prismacolor. Because it just looks like watercolor, which is really quite amazing to have that look of watercolor so convincingly, but instead being colored pencil. And I really like the colors that you chose here, the blue teal in the sky, and it's very soft. Like you got the sky very soft. I sort of have no idea how you'd manage to do that and it not be watercolor. Maybe it's watercolor and colored pencil, because I just have a hard time believing that this isn't watercolor because of the texture. But anyways, the sky is great. I wouldn't change anything about the sky because you don't want it competing with the foreground subject. And you have some nice contrast here with the beak and the face. But one of the things, like again, with light direction, like you want to choose a light direction. And what I mean by that is like, where is the light source? And you can't tell here because there's no obvious shadows to describe the direction that the light is coming from. And so where you'd want to consider things like that is taking some of your darker colors, and let's just hypothetically say that the light source is coming from the upright. This side of the bird will be darker, and then this underside of the wings will also be darker. So you're going to have these darker sections where the light is being blocked. The tail feathers, of course, will be much darker, and this side of the legs, like I think this is like the chest area, belly, and then the highlights, just pull a color from the sky, maybe that's bright enough, yeah, then the highlights will be on the other side, and that's just going to give you a bit more dimension. The same thing with the stick down here, or the branch that it's sitting on, so like the underside of the branch, that will also give that branch a bit more of a three-dimensional look to it. So here's the before. There's no clear distinction of where the light source is, and then with just a little bit of shading and highlight, pulling directly from the colors that you already have on your project here as to not change it too dramatically. That's just going to give it a bit more of a three-dimensional quality. So I'm not sure if that's what you were going for, but that's where you can definitely improve. All right, up next is Linda Lee. And this, this was one of the other projects that I was looking at. I was like, man, how do I critique this? Because it's a clear, there's a clear style here. It's not realism. We're not, what is this bird called again? What is that bird? I know that bird, right? Is it, oh gosh. What, somebody in chat know the name of this bird, right? It's like right on the tip of my tongue. And I can't quite remember what it's called. I think it starts with a P. Maybe it starts with a P. But yeah, I can't remember. Puffin. It's a puffin. Yeah, that's it, a puffin. I got it just before Cherry typed it. Yeah, a puffin. So obviously this is a clear style, not realism. And so the direction to improve a more stylistic look, and in this case it's almost like coloring book style, like you could imagine a children's book having this type of style. And so I'm going to take that into account as far as the critique goes. And I think I think there's a few subtle things you can do to improve the look of this particular style. The first thing is the sky. So if you were to take the sky, let's see here, maybe I can, trying to think of how to draw over this. Let's see here. I wonder if I can remove the outlines. If I can just get the black outlines. Look at that. That's the magic of Photoshop right there. So yeah. So just the black outlines. Yeah, that works. That works well. Let me duplicate this. And those, that didn't work. How do I get that? Oops. Does that work? That didn't work. There we go. I think I got it. I think I can delete these. There. So now I have just the outline. All right. And I'll do multiply here. All right. So let's grab her color of blue. And I'm just going to do this for the sky really quick to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So here's your blue. that you went for with the sky. And what I think you can do is you can add a gradient to the work that you've created. So instead of one plain solid color, so you have your sky, and if you think like generally the sky gets lighter as you get down to the bottom. So I'm just going to take a lighter blue and I'm just going to lighten the sky a little bit at the bottom. And then let's again copy this sky. Oops, what did I do there? No, that is not working. Oh, you know what, whatever. Let's go with putting this on top. There we go. And now I'm just going to erase out the sky to get the sky color. There we go. Just doing this kind of crudely for time's sake. But if you see now that you have like this small gradient in the sky, it just gives it a little bit more space. A little bit more space. And that's something that you can do throughout your coloring in order to just create it a slightly more dynamic piece of work. So having the sky have a gradient, the ground here can also have a gradient. I'm not going to do it, but you could go darker down towards the bottom, go lighter towards the top, something like that. I noticed that one of the things that stuck out to me is that you have a shadow on the trees, but you don't have a shadow anywhere else. So I think also considering a shadow on your puffin here would be a good idea. Hard to do this with this particular style, but if you have a shadow on a bird, then that also helps create a little bit more dynamic of the space, because this shadow on the tree tells us that the light source is coming from the right. So the shadow on the bird also reinforces that. Same thing on the mushrooms here. If you had a little shadow, now you don't have to put shadows on everything, but if you put the shadow on one thing and then nothing else, it stands out. So like shadow on the tree is something that you could do. So those are a few things to think about for this particular style. Anyways, that was harder than I thought it was going to be. Let's move on to Joanne. All right, Joanne here. So this is another Queen's Gambit portrait. As I mentioned, it's a we did this as a art club project, so we might see a couple more of these, I think, throughout today's critique. And one of the things, Joanne, that you did really good is the skin tones. I'm not sure which paper you used, but I really like the paper texture that you have here on your project. You know, did you use the Lenox? It almost looks like the Lenox paper texture. I'm curious. You have to let me know in chat which paper you used, because I do like it a lot. I like that you went lighter with the background. I can grab mine really quick. You can't see it too well, but you can definitely tell that I went darker with my background, closer to what the reference photo was. But the light background also looks really nice. Let's see. Yeah, the skin tone's really great. You did good on that. I think where things got a little off, the chest piece. So again, we're sort of dealing with those outlines. I don't know how well you can see my chest piece. Yeah, it doesn't really show up too much, but you got to try to avoid these very clear outlines on realistic drawings. You have a little bit on the chin right here, And same thing that I was talking about, I think, on Linda's portrait. The way to combat that, I'll just zoom in. Like, you want this color to be faded in to the object that it is, because the outline throws off the illusion a little bit. I think you might have drawn this a kind of bit smaller than I did, based on the scale of your eyelashes. But yeah, just a tiny little inaccuracy right there. I'm being nitpicky because you did a really good job on this. The other thing is this line connecting her nostrils is a bit too clear. I understand the importance of it because we have this dark shadow under her nose here, and that's really what you wanted to have there. You didn't want to have like that solid line that connects her nostrils. This shadow here is not a solid cast shadow, so this should have been more blended out, sort of bigger in general, but also coming into her skin a little bit more softly, so it give it that more rounded look, not this hard edge. So that hard edge kind of throws things off a little bit. But other than that, same thing. So both you and Linda had a little bit too light in this main color of the hair. And again, it goes back to, if you go darker with the surrounding parts of the hair. Those shiny parts look really shiny. So you can see this highlight that runs through here. Had this part of the hair been darker, and you can really see that on mine. You can really see how the shine runs right. Oops, sorry, this is backwards for me. So the shiny part runs right through here, and you can see that this part of her hair is almost black. My drawing, I know this isn't the best camera for this, but you can see that by going darker in this main body of the hair, these parts appear much more shiny, even though we have the same color. We have the same color in the hair there. But other than that, you did a really good job. Keep up the good work, Joanne. All right, up next is Lori. And Lori did this really beautiful pastel piece, landscape, and I think she put a sad face because she did it on what looks like what is that? Trying to remember the brand of pastel paper, but it's that it sort of has that egg crate texture. So she put like bumpy pastel paper, but there's nothing wrong with that pastel paper. Sometimes you can cover up the bumps, sometimes you can't, but it looks really cool regardless of the bumps. I think honestly the color, the values, and everything look really cool with this pastel project. The one thing that bothers me is the horizon line, or in this case the water line, is really slanted. And if I were to just fix that, then this would be like perfect. I wouldn't change anything else about it. I'm gonna actually chop off this part here and this part down here, and let me get the sides straight again. So I'm just kind of chopping it to make that line straight. And if that line was straight, I honestly wouldn't change anything really about this. The other thing that you could do is incorporate some of the sky color into these mountains a little bit, because the further the distances of objects, the lighter it's going to be. So you don't have so much dark value in these backward or these distant objects. So it would sort of share the same color of the sky, and just push that further back. This one looks and feels a little bit closer, so the fact that it's darker makes a little bit more sense, but it's still, I think it's maybe a bit too dark. And that's just going to help you create that depth. The other thing you could do is consider just, depending on how smooth you want your water, it's going to reflect the sky. And you have two completely different colored blues from the sky and the water, which is just not going to happen. When the water is really smooth, it's going to reflect really well. You'll see like exact reflections, and you want the reason water appears blue is because it's reflecting the sky, and so it's not going to reflect like this is more of a light gray blue, and then this was like a much more brighter cobalt blue, and you're just not going to have that water. It's going to reflect the color of the sky. So if you have like a grayish blue in the sky, you want to make sure you utilize that same grayish blue in the water. The other thing that you can even you could even consider just straight up mirroring the sky. So here's, I gotta flip it this way too. So you have the mountain. Wait, no. I had it right the first time. So you have this mountain here in the sky. This is another little thing that you could do with the water. You could have the objects directly reflecting, and now you have sort of this very smooth water reflecting exactly what you see on the other side. Usually it's a bit blurry, but nonetheless, you get a bit of the reflection of the ground above. And so that's another direction you could take it, depending on how smooth the water is. But that's just kind of quick and dirty, not exactly the way I would recommend doing it. But yeah, the landscape looks really cool. Okay, Ozzy, you take care. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you next time. Alrighty, up next is Brenda. She has this lovely colored pencil portrait, and I don't have the reference photo for this one. So again, this is that where exactly is the light source in coming from? It's sort of possible to suggest that it's like in front, like top left area, because of the obvious highlight right here on this part of the forehead, and then also you see sort of the shadows underneath the eyebrows a little bit, and you also see the smile lines, the shadows underneath. And I think the biggest problem with the shadows is the color. So you have like this color here, which isn't bad for a skin tone, but it's not really a shadow color. It's more of like a mid-tone color for the skin. You have some yellows and oranges and reds, pinks in the face. So you have a nice variety of those color tones. But then you have this shadow, sort of a sandy color, and this is a true mid-tone. Like this is the gray in skin that you see all the time. And this color here should be used more for just all of the skin. All of the skin needs more gray. You sort of have just like the oranges and pinks, and you don't have enough gray. And that would smooth out the skin quite a bit if you used this color here. This is not a shadow color by any means, because it's void of saturation. It doesn't have any real color to it. This is where you want to use like a nice dark purple for some of those color tones in the shadows. underneath the eyebrows. Of course, purple is not the only color. This right now looks sort of like mascara, but these shadows that show up, I imagine in the reference photo they're much darker, and you just didn't show them in your drawing. Then you balance out the purple with some of the browns. The purple's there, but you balance it out with the yellowy browns, because purple and yellow are complements. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough to sort of do a correction without the reference photo, but a lot of the skin down here I feel like should be darker based on some of the light that I can gather from the picture. It's like I said, it's really tough to do this without the reference photo and to sort of guess where the lighting is supposed to be coming from. I imagine the left side of the face here is supposed to be darker, but finding those value differences is really key for establishing that three-dimensional quality in portraits. You had some good colors that you used in the skin, but you just didn't have the dark values, which I know is very scary in portraits. And then also, again, with the hair, it looks more like you've spent all the time drawing every individual hair as opposed to establishing the dominant shapes. I can't really do much of a correction with the hair. I think this is a good example. This part down here, really good example of just drawing way too many individual hairs. What this should look like, let me use a lasso tool here. What this should look like on the first initial layers, I'm just going to do this part right here, is you want to establish the dominant shapes, and I usually call these squiggly diamonds. Let me just grab some hair color here. Solid shape, no individual hairs. Individual hairs shouldn't ever be drawn until like layer 3 or 4. And then for the brighter areas, you have more squiggly diamonds. Again, I don't have the reference photo, but essentially like that. And then this. So you want to build the hair with these shapes. Once you've established the dominant shapes, that's going to give you the volume of the hair, because the focus is on the values, not the texture. Only once you have those dominant shapes, then do you come in with the individual hairs. And then you cut across them. You break up those shapes with your individual hairs, both a dark color and a highlight color, depending on what the hair calls for. But you only have to do a couple individual hairs, and those dominant shapes are going to give you the volume, and then the individual hairs that you put on top are going to give you the texture. And you can see that just a few lines across those shapes give you more of a hair-like look than, say, 100 lines that you've put through here. Because what you'd want to see is you'd want to see this volume where the dark color sneaks behind, because this shape here should be all dark. And if you take the time to establish that shape, that's going to make this part of the hair stick out. That's what gives you that volume. And then you add the hairs over top of it. So that's the big issue with the hair, is that you skipped the first 2 steps of doing hair correctly. And you never start hair by drawing individual hairs. You always start hair by focusing on the larger shapes. And I have so many tutorials on hair. And that same exact thing translates right over to the dog. You want to focus on the big shapes, get the values, get the volume, then add the individual hairs. But yeah, keep up the good work. Yeah, let's move on. All right, up next is Matthew. He has this adorable portrait of a dog. I believe he said his first time using the luminance colored pencils, and he mentioned he's still struggling with the backgrounds. I don't see much. I don't see much where you can correct on the background, aside from just softening. Excuse me, softening some of the edges, which is nitpicky at the most. If you soften some of the edges there, which is just takes a little delicate touch with your pencils, and some more time. That's really all it is. That's just going to make the background more blurry looking, and then I think you'll be satisfied with your backgrounds. But aside from that, I really like the colors in here. The individual hairs here in the ear, they feel a little thick. They feel just a tiny bit too thick, which you can correct that by using your darker color here and just sort of coming in here, like here's this part here. These hairs just feel a little thick to me. And so if we take this color that surrounds them and you just do another layer, squeezing those hairs a little bit. So I'm just going to sort of shrink them down. Just make them thinner. I can't tell how small this drawing is. It looks kind of small, but if you can get in there with a sharp pencil and shrink those hairs by thinning them, by just working the darker color on either side, that's going to help them feel more realistic in the sense that they won't be that thick. They just feel like fat hairs. And so there's the hair that I thinned in comparison to like this hair that feels quite thick, or this hair over here, or how these ones intertwine. That's one of the harder things to do with hair. And possibly, you could skip, like if I were to fill in this shape here, if I was to fill in this shape, instead of trying to work around all these thin hairs, fill it in and then grab the thin color or grab the light color and then come in here like this and over top, because you can do those layers with colored pencils, and get the thinner hairs that way. That way you don't have to work, you don't have to draw like this shape. You don't have to draw that shape and fill it in and then have these blank parts of the hairs. You can always add those later on. That's also something that I recommend trying. Aside from that, the things on the chest get a little squirrely down here. I'm not quite sure what's happening. I know that the chest of dogs and cats and stuff, the fur gets bunched up and it changes direction a lot. I would just spend a little bit more time sort of coming up with a strategy to approach those complex convergence of fur, because the difficult part with those areas is that you have fur coming from multiple directions, and sometimes the fur direction collides and creates like these little pinch points. If you can map out those areas a little bit better, you might have more success and not have, because it's really hard for the viewer to interpret exactly what's happening here. I see it as fur. I don't know if everybody sees it as fur, but it also feels like you lose a little bit of your texture also over here. It feels like you've lost a little bit of your fur texture in comparison to like up here on the face. Oh, thank you, Lisa, so much for the super chat. You are far too kind. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Sneaks. I missed your question. Maybe you asked that question regarding hair. For the hair, when I'm talking about doing the shapes, for hair, yeah, I guess you could consider it an underpainting. And yeah, it's like layer 1 and 2 that you focus on those shapes there. All right, moving on to Lisa G. This beautiful pastel and colored pencil portrait. I kind of want to get the reference photo from Lisa and do this portrait myself because it looks really, really pretty. I love the mask and the little bit here where you can see through the lace of the mask and see through see the skin through that. That's really well done. It's difficult to do. I would have loved to see it a little bit more down here at the bottom because here it just feels like material, but up here it seems to be more see-through. Yeah, you're welcome. Like I said, I have many tutorials on doing hair, both for animals and for portraits of people. So definitely search those out because breaking down, like I break down hair like all the time. In fact, this project here, perfect tutorial for doing hair because this hair went very easily. Every once in a while, you know, I get hung up on complex hair, but that portrait there went smoothly with the hair part of it. Anyways, so this portrait here, love the colors, love the like the composition of it and everything in the subject matter. Now, where to improve? The first thing I want to focus on is the eyes, because her pupils are gigantic. And there's 2 reasons that a person's pupils, well, I guess there's 3 reasons because there's medical reasons. Your pupils might be ginormously dilated. But if it's not drugs, it's lack of light. So your pupils expand in darkness so that you can capture more light and see better. There's some medical reasons that your pupils might be dilated, but drugs is the main reason. And I don't like to imagine that this lady is under the influence of something. Her pupils are just, when I zoom in here, they're actually comically large. And you know, pupils are just black spaces. They're just black spaces. And if you shrunk them, if they were smaller, you know, you'd see more of the color of her eyes. You'd see more of it. I'm going to just arbitrarily shrink her pupils a little bit real quick. I'm not trying to make her eyes look good, just shrinking the pupils. So give me a minute. So smaller pupils for sure. The other thing is using the black, grab black, and having the darker part of her iris at the top, more dark at the top. Sort of like that. That's going to make her eyes more cylindrical. So they already look more cylindrical. Here's ginormous pupils. Here's smaller pupils, more cylindrical. The blue, maybe a little bit too blue. Let's go a little bit darker. Something like this. Her eyes just a bit too bright like the irises themselves. There we go. And then also the scleras, the white parts of her eyes. They will also have shadows at the top. So just make those a little bit darker near the top. And now just, I mean, her eyes are so much more piercing, right? Because that highlight, I didn't touch the highlight in the actual iris above the pupil. But because I darkened everything around it, they look brighter, right? So here the eyes feel very flat here because the irises are too small, because the pupils take up way too much space on the iris. The top side and the bottom side, there's no significant difference in value. So by adding that dark part at the top and letting the color kind of glow near the bottom, you get more of that spherical shape of the eye. And then also for the white parts, the scleras of the eyes, I just added that drop shadow from the upper eyelid. And so all of the light is down towards the bottom. And that just makes her eyes look much more shiny, more glass-like. So there's one thing that I think you could definitely improve on for this portrait here. The other thing is the contrast in the skin colors. So this is the darkest skin color in the entire portrait, which isn't bad, but you can go darker. I'm just going to go straight, like not necessarily black, but quite a bit of purpley black, like dark magenta. Underneath her nose here, this shadow. I feel like there should be a drop shadow from the mask, at least a little bit. I'm always going purple here. Purple allows some of the red of the skin. And then the drop shadow underneath the chin, this one's a little bit harder to do without the reference photo, without knowing what it is the light is actually doing. But also these muscles here along the neck, the anatomy is off a bit in the neck. Let me sort of draw the neck here so you can get a better idea of where the anatomy is off. Let's just go with blue. I think blue should show up nicely. So her neck comes down from here and sort of here, and then her chin, right? And so trying to figure out where the center part of her neck is, it sort of should be like this. So that's like this part of her neck. And so her clavicle bones meet, or should meet, somewhere here, which means that this muscle, the muscle that runs along the side of the neck here, this part of the nape of the neck where the clavicles meet, that's where those muscles are connected, and they go back from there. So this muscle needs to sweep in more towards this point. Same thing with this. And so that's where that anatomy is wrong on the muscles of the neck, which kind of creates this, like, it's like you took the head and just arbitrarily slid it over to a different side. And so that kind of messes up the anatomy there. And then also, because that anatomy is awkwardly shifted over, because the head is over here and the clavicles are over here, that messes up her shoulders, because this should not be her shoulder right now. Because you can see that if I extend this line out, her shoulder starts now. Like, this is where her left shoulder is, but this is where her right shoulder is. And you can see that this being the center point, this is not the same distance. This shoulder is much farther out. So you have this shifting in the anatomy. I can only guess that you freehanded this, which is impressive nonetheless, but that shift in anatomy sort of created this awkward transition from her neck down to her chest. This part is great. The face, the mask, and everything. I don't see anything anatomically incorrect there, but the neck area is a bit shifted weirdly. So always make sure that the underdrawing before you start coloring and whatnot is accurate. All right, moving on to Dadek, and he has a couple. Another portrait here of Anya Taylor-Joy. And yeah, this one came out really good. Again, the lighter background. Who was it? Joanne did a lighter background. I really like this color of blue that you chose for the background. It really works well with her skin tone, her like milkier, lighter skin tone. I almost wish that I went with this color blue because it does look really nice. It also lets the dress stand out as well. One thing, so everything looks really good. I love the eyes. They are very shiny. The hand looks really great. The chest piece looks really great. The colors, everything. You have this really nice orange in the skin down here. This really lovely orange brown. It looks really great on the skin, on the hand, but I don't see it on the face or the neck. And it makes the hand and the face feel like they don't quite match. And so I would have loved to see some of this orange color in the shadow on the nose, over here on the face a little bit, the cheek area, and the neck. I would have loved to see that orange from the skin on the hand on the face, because I feel like the face is missing a little bit of color, a little bit of that saturation down here on the chin a little bit also. I'm just kind of throwing it around everywhere, but yeah, the skin on the hand feels a little bit different than the skin on the face and neck. And then again, same thing. It seems to be a pattern here. Maybe I need to reevaluate my teaching of doing hair. But again, the base color of the hair is just not dark enough. Yeah, it's just not dark enough. You gotta go darker. Let me grab. Let's see here. Sorry about that. I'm going to grab my picture here. Instead of holding it up in the camera that you can barely see, I'm going to grab my portrait here quick. So you can see the value difference in the hair. So here's my hair. And you can see where my hair is just darker. Like it's just darker, and I just added more black to it. And that's what gives that shine right there, that very clear shine. Oops, let me grab a brighter color. So you can see the highlight that runs through this part. And you don't really see that here. You can see that it's brighter, yes, but you don't get the glow. You can really see the glow through the hair here, where the light is hitting and the hair looks shiny. And it's also very helpful in this little corner right there where you see a few of those little highlighted bits. And I mean, you guys know that when I was drawing this, when you guys were following along, that I didn't go through and brighten these up with color. All I did was apply that darker color for the main body of the hair over here. And so some of those you can see the shapes are the same that we have here. It's just this main body here is just not as dark as mine, which just doesn't give you that shine that runs through here, and that makes her hair more voluminous. Same thing back here. This part is much further back behind the head than the part of the bangs that kind of come down through here. And so, yeah, it's just that value that doesn't quite reach its peak in the hair. You just got to work on that. And then, of course, you come through and then show us this beautiful graphite portrait, Dadek. Honestly, you need to do hair like this, but in colored pencil, because you have just a vast dynamic range of values in the hair, and it really has a lot of volume because of it. You can, like this part of the hair being really dark, you just feel like it's farther back, and then here, this part comes forward. You can almost feel it coming forward closer to you as this part gets brushed back behind the ear a little bit. Great texture, really great shapes. I can see the shapes in the hair to give it that dimension and everything. And then some of the individual hairs, the subtle creasing on the neck, those horizontal lines that wrap around the neck. As people get older, those lines get more and more obvious, and they can be hard to do and make them look good. Here you did a really fantastic job with the neck. Honestly, my favorite part of this portrait, funny enough, is actually the neck, because these lines that cut across here, these sort of wrinkle lines, those are tricky to do, and you have them just subtle enough to not make her look like she's super old in the neck, but still give her like the appropriate age, which doesn't look that old in the first place, but still, obviously, teenagers, mid-20s, don't have those lines showing up as much. So I'd say like, I don't want to guess the age, but the neck is really, really well done. The facial features, the shadow, the shading on the nose, the cheeks, the subtle creases around the mouth, just deep enough, again, to accurately represent the age of the person, but not so deep to make her look too old. I would say like low 30s to mid 40s is the age that those subtle features represent. They look really, really good. The only thing that I could possibly consider improving is finding ways to add the sparkle of highlight, depending on how much brighter you can go on the highlights. But like, if the cheeks, the tip of the nose, if those parts could just be lightened just a tiny bit more, just to bring them forward, the top of the eyebrow there, maybe even top of the eyelid, but that's how subtle of a change that I think that you could potentially make, maybe even a little bit in the hair, just a touch. That's about it, but it's a really, really good 39. Okay, I was right there then. Yeah, looks really good. Your graphite portraits are super good. I hope to see that quality in your colored pencil portraits very soon. All right, up next is Cherry. She has this adorable pastel portrait of a dog. And I remember you asked me some questions about this not too long ago. Yeah, not too long ago. I can't even remember what it was that you specifically asked. I like the color of the background. I like that you didn't make too much of the background. The background is just kind of like a softer color with some blues and some greens. And you know what I just noticed now that I'm looking at it again, this looks like some kind of shed or building, or I'm not really sure exactly what, but you kind of picked these colors. It's sort of this bluish green from right here, and you just kind of spread it out throughout the background. And I think those colors look really good with this project. It does seem like there's a few subtle drawing inaccuracies. I don't know what it is. It feels like this part, the snout of the dog, feels a bit puffier. Let me see if I can take this into the liquify tool and just unpuffy the snout, because this is what I keep looking at. I keep looking at this part right here, and it just feels like it's too puffy. You know what I mean? Like it's too thick there. Is this the eraser one? Okay, there. So there's the after, there's the before. You see how it feels more rounded, and it kind of gives it this bloated look. I think that's the thing that's kind of throwing me off a little bit. Other than that, it looks good. Yeah, other than that, it looks really good. And so the other thing that I think, remember when you add or change colors to the environment, you have to also reflect those colors in your subject. So this bright blue, I would have really loved to see kind of thrown into the fur a little bit more, just to help harmonize all of the colors. And so having a little bit of that blue, maybe a little bit of the green or whatnot, in those transitions of the values, just a small thing, just a touch of blue, and that kind of harmonizes the colors a little bit. But otherwise, it looks really good. Also in the eyes, some of this blue in the eyes, just kind of reflecting in there. Small stuff, but it's really good. Adorable portrait. Good job, Cherry. All right, up next is Marcy. This is just a quick work in progress. I think this is, it's like water soluble stuff. It's like water soluble graphite or colored pencil or watercolor pencils or something along those lines. I think you're in the right path. I mean, the drawing looks accurate, and you just kind of started, it looks like. But what I would recommend is try not to jump around too much. Maybe focus on one part at a time. I don't know if you intend on doing the background, but if you do, I recommend just putting the background in, getting it done, and then probably doing this head wrap thing. I don't know what to call it, but here you sort of started it, and then you went to the face, and then the lips, and maybe this is like the hair. I'm not sure what that is exactly, but I would just stick with one thing and at least fill it in semi 100% before jumping to like different parts, because oftentimes what I found is that when you're jumping to different things and you never get one thing closer to being complete, you sort of start to feel overwhelmed, or you get to the ugly stage in every single object, and then everything looks kind of ugly and you feel discouraged from it looking halfway done. So focus on where you want to do. Maybe just do the face. Just ignore everything else. Do the face and the neck, and then the head piece, and then the background, however you want to approach it. But just focus on one part of the project at a time, so you're not jumping around a lot, and you don't get discouraged from that. But you look like you're on the right track. right, up next is Susan. She did this was another one of the projects, the art club projects. I think it looks like you took more of a like a sketch approach here. I know that you drew out the reference photo by hand, and this part that almost looks like a swan head, actually, now that I look at it. But I'm not sure if you were going for that like a particular style, sort of a warped, free-handed style where things don't have to look realistic, but with the cross hatching in the background, I see that cross hatching a lot in the texture of this material, and it still looks rustic. It still looks rustic because of the colors, but it has that more directional, all of those directional crosshatch lines. I'm not sure if that's the style that you were going for. If you were, then that's fine. It looks good that way. But if you wanted to try to capture the graininess of the texture of the rust itself, you can't do that. You can't do that directional cross hatching because that's going to give you a different texture. Like it's going to give you almost a cloth-like texture as opposed to a metal rusted texture. So just keep that in mind. The colors look good, and as far as the style goes, there's nothing wrong with it. There's really nothing to correct. For the background, I'm not sure what your aim was for the background here, but you sort of just encapsulate the main subject by this space around it. Like your cross hatching never reaches it. And if you're going to add the background, notice that the object has a very clear established light. You can see that the light is up and slightly to the right, giving you these really dark, it's natural light, so that's why you have these really clear, distinct drop shadows. Those drop shadows need to be translated to the object that it's attached to. So this lock would have a really dark drop shadow beneath it on what I imagine to be wood door. And you didn't establish any of that while also coloring some of this area in. So it would have been better to see like these very clear drop shadows. I'm going to just sketch in some very arbitrary drop shadows really quick just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So all of these would have this drop shadow. Something like this. So all those shadows from the objects would be on the surface that it's attached to. And so I would have liked to see that because that shows that you have an understanding of what the light is doing. And so just keep that in mind for future projects like this that you sort of freestyle a little bit. All right, and then Susan, you also did the portrait here. I'm not sure if you freehanded this or you used the line art. If the picture, it looks like the picture is laying flat on a table and you took a picture of it at an angle, because that's why the shoulders like look really wide and the hand looks really big in comparison to the face, because you have some parallax there. I can't correct that digitally. Well, maybe I can a little bit, but it looks like there's a bit of parallax on the photo. because it looks like the photo's lying flat and you took a picture of it at an angle, making the bottom look wider than the top. So that doesn't quite correct it. Maybe it also needs to be taller a little bit. Yeah, trying to correct for what I think is some parallax, but either way, can't quite tell if you used the line art or if you freehanded it. Sort of looks like you freehanded it. If you did, the eyes are a little bit bigger than what they should be proportionally, and the jawline isn't quite symmetrical. So this part here looks pretty good. It's nice and rounded, and this side looks a little less rounded. I'm sort of flexing back the other direction a bit, and there's some directionality in the background that I see, sort of kind of this angle here, and so you want you want to remove that unless the background calls for it. In this case, the background was very blurry, out of focus, and soft, sort of stereotypical photography backdrop of portraits. So you want to avoid those directional lines when the background doesn't call for it. And in this case, these sort of diagonal directions are very distracting for this particular composition. So in the future, with a compositional portrait like this, try to stick to either horizontal or vertical directional lines if you want direction in the background. Horizontal is probably better than vertical, but cases can be made for both. But diagonal, I would avoid diagonal directional lines for backdrops like this. You did try to freehand, okay. Yeah, nothing wrong with freehanding, but I would remember to take notice of the vertical and horizontal scaffolding lines. I don't remember if you did the how to draw or how to use the grid method. I don't know if you did that tutorial. If you haven't did that tutorial, I definitely recommend it. I did it a while back ago, but you can use some of those techniques that I talk about in the later part of that tutorial to improve your freehand drawing skills. In particular, the idea of using lines like what I'm about to show you. Like, for instance, when you're looking at the reference photo, you can take like the corner of the eye, imagine a line that goes straight down. Where's my portrait here? So if I take the corner of her eye and I draw straight down, you can see that I hit the corner of her mouth, and you can see on yours, the corner of your mouth is outside that line. Pretty good with the nostril here. You can see that her nostril flare is inside that line. If I take this corner of the eye over here, again, you can see, okay, your nostril is hitting that line. Let's see how it is on mine. No. And then again, the corner of the mouth is only slightly outside that line, and you can see you have like quite a bit of her mouth outside the corner of her eye there. The other thing is, of course, horizontal lines. So you can use the horizontal line to see that the outside corners of her eyes are on the same horizontal line. This one's a little bit higher, but not by much. And you can use measurements like this. So this is the measurement of the width of her eye. So if I take that, I drew on the wrong layer. This box here, you can see that this box is more square. This box is much more rectangle, which tells us that this eye is wider, and that won't be the case with a straightforward portrait. So you can see that yeah, this box I drew taller, but the width is the same. And so, yeah, those small things. You can also do like where the neck hits the jaw. If we draw straight up, goes straight through her pupil. But on mine, also straight through the pupil. So you have that line matched up. Let's have a look at this edge. So this goes up. This is outside the eye. And if we do it on yours, oops. If we do it on yours, it hits the corner of the eye. So it's those types of measurements that you can make to help improve your freehand drawing. Alrighty, let's move on to Katie. Katie has this really nice male figure. It looks like toned paper, like toned tan or toned gray paper. It looks really cool. Oh, hello, Barbara. Yeah, this came out really good. There's a few things, like I think these are supposed to be like wings, like origami almost. It's like origami wings. Almost look like they're supposed to be made of paper. Not sure what this is. At first I thought it was supposed to be like a sword, but then I was looking at it and I thought it was supposed to be like a scroll, like a scroll that has like handles on the side to unravel it. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be, but it's rather interesting and obscure. But overall, the anatomy looks pretty good for the chest, ribs, why can I not say abdomen? The chest, ribs, and abdomen. The right arm, the shoulder, the bicep look really good. The tricep looks a little thin, so this part here looks a little underdeveloped considering how fit this guy is, especially like you have the rounded shoulder coming into the tricep right here, and his bicep looks well developed, but his forearm needs to step up his forearm workout a little bit. His hand looks good. Thumb looks a little long. Yeah, thumb looks a little long. Mainly just critiquing the anatomy here because it's more of a figure drawing than anything. But the other thing that stands out is the vein that's coming down. It's a bit too accentuated on the shadow side of things. So you have like this dark line. I would have preferred, let's grab kind of this color, this darker color down here a little bit. I would have preferred to see a bit more dimension in the shoulder here. So a little bit of that rounded part of the shoulder sticking out. The bicep and the tricep look really good. They look good here. The forearm, now there's this muscle, I don't know the name of the muscle, but there's a muscle that runs along this side. It's sort of right here from the elbow. I would have liked to see a little bit of the definition on that muscle, and some softening of this dark line of the vein. The dark line is just a bit too dark. It kind of cuts into the skin almost. You don't need to have that strong of a distinction. See, it still shows up quite nicely after softening the edge of the shadow that you have for the vein. It's more or less just a highlight, not so much a shadow. The ribs here, the chest, abdomen look good. I don't know why I keep struggling on that word. I'm not sure what's happening with the hip though. The hip throws me off. It looks like his leg was detached completely and it like snaps in like a G.I. Joe or something like that, like one of those action figures. I don't know if he's wearing thing. I don't want to describe what he might be wearing or might not be wearing, but regardless, if he's wearing something that has like the string straps, I can tell you that it's not flattering to look like your leg is being chopped off like that. And I would just straight up not do it. Like, those are some artistic things that you need to take into account and be like, well, that doesn't look good the way it is. So I'm just going to eliminate it and not have his leg look like it's chopped off like that. The other thing is his thigh. Like, he's got some extra thick leg right here, which I just think it's not, I don't think it's supposed to be like that. I would say probably closer to something like this, minus that. So a bit thinner. This, like, this part is a bit too bowed out also. I don't even know if I can correct that. It's just a bit much, that little bump there that you have. Aside from that, I mean, it's this arm also. Yeah, I almost forgot. Two things about his left arm. One, that you gotta be careful with that elbow. You're gonna put somebody's eye out with that elbow. That is the sharpest elbow I think I've ever seen. That needs to be like rounded off a little bit. The other thing is it looks way shorter than it should be. If you look at this, let me just grab a dark color here. Where's my brush? So if we outline this shoulder, draw his bone there, put his elbow, and I just take this and I put it over here. His shoulder is obviously on the other side of his pec, but his elbow, even if instead of being this way, is flexed this way and you have a little bit of foreshortening, even accounting for some of that foreshortening, his arm still looks a little short because he's kind of like reaching back like this. And so from this angle, this part of his arm is going to shrink depending on the angle. It looks a little bit too short, but for sure his elbow is just way too sharp. And then also the color of his skin on that arm doesn't match the rest of his skin anywhere else, which also throws me off a bit. Aside from that, like, it's the face is done really well. Like, that angle of the face, that's the really difficult angle for the face. Either way, Katie, you did a fantastic job. Just trying to give you as much helpful input as I can. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Final one. This is Ella. This is a work in progress portrait. I'm not sure if like this is your dad or your brother or a friend or whatnot, but this looks like a really nice guy. I'll tell you what. I'd like to have a drink with him. He just looks like a lot of fun. That smile is infectious. So far, it looks really good. You got the beard going on. I think you may have went just a little bit too heavy on the initial layering of the beard. You may want to put some of the skin tone back in to leave some of those gaps. You can kind of see the gaps on his cheeks a little bit. So maybe add in some of the skin tone there to make the beard less thick, because it's not as thick as you sort of have it, kind of almost too thick there. And adding some of that skin tone back in to put those holes in the beard will thin it out a little bit. Mustache looks good though. Mustache is not too bad. The other thing is the shadows. So right now your skin is very, very flat, very one-dimensional, or two-dimensional, I guess I should say. So for instance, this side of the face, the light is on the right side here. And so you want to make sure that this side of the face, wow, look at that color difference. That is the exact color. Like that's the exact color of that side of the face. And you can see just how drastically darker it is. Now, granted, this is digital, so it's a little bit unrealistic to expect these values in person. But same thing with the smile lines here. These values must be darker. And same thing with the eyes. All of this skin here, look how dark this is. That's so much darker than what you have it. I know that the wrinkles around the eyes and stuff can be scary, but if you want that quality, that pro quality, that three-dimensional quality, you can't be afraid of those dark values. This is the value of the shadows on the nose. That right there. The actual skin tone is much grayer. It's much grayer. See how gray that is? And I know that you've been there for some of the tutorials where I talk about how gray skin is. Skin is very gray. And so you have to readjust, recalibrate. Look at this. Look at that shadow. Look how dark that is. That is, look, I promise you that is the color. That's the color. I'm not making it up. And then if we get this dark blue, that's the shirt, right? If you get the actual skin color, look how much darker that is, and grayer. It's a lot less peach. You have very peachy skin. This is a perfect example of coloring skin the way you think the color of skin is. Oh, it's your husband, Ella? Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't even consider it could have been your husband also. Yeah, he looks like a really fun guy. I'd love to meet him one day. But like I was saying, this is a perfect example of coloring skin the way you perceive skin to be, not the way not the actual colors that it is. So I highly recommend you reevaluate your color choice for the skin, because if you want that really three-dimensional quality, this is a really awesome portrait for many reasons, aside from that smile. But one of the things that I love about this portrait is the colors that happen in the skin, because you sort of like get the natural complements. Since the surrounding area is so green, you see all the green and yellow in the highlights, and then on this side, in the shadow side, you get a lot of the reds. So you get this natural complementary color scheme happening in the skin tones. You have a lot of these like nice rich red colors, even a little bit of the ninja purple on the brighter parts in the shadows, and then you get more of the greener highlights on this side of the face that you can see here. Like that's very green, and then this is very red, and so you get green and red, which one of my favorite complementary color schemes. So you want to make sure you get that in your skin, and by going darker here, you know, you're thinking, well, if I go really dark with the creases and the around the eyes, I'm going to make my husband look like he's 80 years old. It's not the case, as long as the skin around those wrinkles is also the correct value. Because look how much darker all of these colors are on the skin. Much darker. And you're just gonna get a richer experience in your portrait if you use the correct value of color. So yeah, you have your work cut out for you, because this is by no means an easy portrait. You have all the facial hair that you have to deal with. You have all of the values the very, very dark skin tones. You also have this very, very gray. I would recommend getting this gray. Find this gray right here. Look at this, smack dab in the middle of the forehead. Completely gray. It's like completely void of color. It's like totally gray. Get that gray. That gray is going to be your best friend, because you can almost color the entire skin this gray color and already be improved on what you have here. Because once you get to the shadow colors, it won't be so scary. Totally gray. Totally gray. Yep, you're welcome. All right, that is the last project that I have here. You guys have some fantastic work in progress and fantastic work you are turning out. I greatly appreciate all of the submissions. I hope you guys enjoyed today's live critiques and learned something. I always enjoy doing this. I like taking the time to look at all of your work and hopefully give you some good insight on where you can improve and where to take your work. Yeah, that is going to do it for today. So again, thank you guys so much for coming by and tolerating me, and hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see all of the art club members on Monday. Take care. Peace.